Hello, everyone. My name is Shelby Cooke. I'm the editor-in-chief at Film East, and today I'm speaking with Daniel Everitt-Lock, director of the new documentary, Our Planet, the People, My Blood. Thank you for joining us today, Daniel.
That's all right. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah.
So, before we get into your film, why don't we start off talking a little bit about your career and your background? So, how did you get into filmmaking and documentary storytelling?
Yeah, I mean, my kind of path is a little strange, honestly. I've kind of been doing photography for ever since I was a kid. But I ended up working as an actor first of
Oh,
all
nice.
when I first moved to London in my early 20s, and then that kind of turned into stunts
Mm.
because very like a long martial arts background and stuff. So it kind of just like this natural progression. And then through that, we kind of started making our own work, and my role on that came as like the cinematographer
Hmm.
because of like a photography background, and that just led me into being a cinematographer really, which is what I've been doing for the last 10 years. Well, that's 11, 12 years actually now. So yeah. And then directing kind of it's never really been something I've kind of actively chased. It was more kind of I kind of found that for to kind of be successful in one thing, you kind of had to promote yourself as one thing.
Yeah.
I kind of found like a lot of people at the start of my career and stuff, it was a lot of kind of like, oh, I'm an editor, I'm a director, I'm a cinematographer, and all these things, and you just kind of don't ever really get taken seriously as one of those things.
Hmm.
So I kind of realized that my specialty was in cinematography and stuck to that and promoting myself only as a cinematographer. And the thing really was that as a director, if something comes along and it's the right fit, I'll do it, but it's never anything that was actively kind of pushed, you know.
Yeah.
So it's as and when, and if something kind of takes my fancy, I'll take it on, you know.
That's kind of, I mean, especially we interview a lot of like these early mid-level career directors, and that is the story that they all say is you kind of have to be that jack of all trades. You have to do everything in order
Yeah,
to kind of make the career work. Um, which like you just said, you're a director, you're a cinematographer, you're a producer, you're a stunt person. Is there one path in particular that you enjoy the most?
yeah. Cinematography is the thing. Like I said, that's what promote myself as a cinematographer only, and that's what I've done professionally for the last
Mm,
last 10 years. But alongside that, you end up doing a lot of stuff. And I mean, that's the thing is if you do want to direct and you want to make your own stuff, you end up naturally producing anyway,
yeah.
because when you're starting out as a director, no one's going to jump on board and just help you make these things, generally kind of thing. No one's giving you money for nothing, so you kind of end up producing your own stuff anyway, really, and more often than not, end up writing your own stuff as well. Um, I think I've managed to leverage a lot of the fact that as a cinematographer, I've worked on a lot of things, built quite a network for that. So then dipping into directing, it does become a little bit easier because you've got some good connections, you've got people that help you like in certain areas. So that's been useful.
Yeah. Is there going to be a martial arts action film in the future?
I've got a few scripts.
Oh,
I've got a
great.
few scripts. Yeah, I've got a lot of scripts sat around. That's maybe I don't know what's next. That's
Yeah.
we'll see.
So moving into your new film, Our Planet, the People, My Blood,
Mm.
can you give us a little bit of an overview of what this documentary is about?
Yeah, so it's a global expose of communities affected by nuclear weapons testing. So we kind of look at we kind of when we started this thing, the original idea was it was just about atomic veterans kind of thing, really. And then as we kind of progressed through the story, we ended up meeting people and finding that there was actually more of a global issue to this thing. And then it was kind of like, well, um, maybe there's a bigger story here. And ultimately, the theme kind of really became about really governmental injustice against its own citizens, really. And that was this kind of this theme of injustice. And so um, the uh, the like the our subject matter went beyond just the atomic veterans, and we ended up meeting with different downwinders and Hibakusha, people that survived like the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings and stuff, and uranium miners, all these communities that were affected, and we kind of saw this like global look that hadn't been told before. So that
Mm.
was kind of like our unique viewpoint on this thing.
Yeah, I mean the global perspective is what really intrigued me. You sort of start off with this Christmas Island UK based story, and then it's sort of
Mm,
all these. It's sort of like the vines just keep growing and growing to all these different places around the world that are affected by it. And it's not only just the locations of where these testings took place, but it's about, the downwinds, about it moving to other parts, especially in the US, moving down to through the rest of the country. Um,
yeah,
it was quite, it was really powerful because, you obviously hear a lot about the effects of the nuclear testing, especially in relation to Hiroshima and those big places where the bomb did go off. But I think looking at, you know, this perspective of where they were being tested. And, this sort of no one really talks about the fact that right here in the US, these bombs went off. And,
yeah,
even though there was nothing around, there's still an impact to that. So that was a really interesting perspective of the story.
yeah. I think this is the thing. The thing that got me into this originally was there was a short documentary by a director, I think he's a Dutch director called Morgan Nib, and he made this film called "What a Nuclear Weapons Explosion Feels Like,"
Mm.
and that film looks specifically at the atomic veterans who were sent out by their governments who go and experience the atomic weapon going off and the effects that it's had on them due to the radiation, the effects that it's had on their DNA that has then been passed down to multiple generations and stuff has just affected generations of families and all of this was done, as we learned through the documentary with the knowledge of, the governments knowing what it would do to these men, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and so their experience of that bomb, watching that short doc was so incredible. They talked specifically, there was one guy that talked specifically about having the flash of the bomb was so intense that they were told to turn away from the bomb, cover their eyes with their hands, and through his closed eyes, he could see the X-ray of his hands and
Oh,
all the
yeah.
people in front of him from how bright this flash was. And that just, from a cinematography standpoint, that stuck with me as like this amazing visual
Mm.
that was like, that's just insane. And then they talk more about all of these things and how there was actually 2,000 nuclear weapons tests worldwide by all these by different countries, UK, US, France, Russia, China, and these it kind of hit me in a way that like I've never heard about this. Yeah, I'm in my
Yeah.
20s. I'd never heard about this at the time. This is about 10 years ago. I'm in my 20s. I never heard about this. And it's like I was just kind of like a little bit dumbfounded by it. So I started talking to friends and family about it and kind of, figuring out who knew about this. And a lot of friends and family had absolutely no idea. And I was like, how is this not a bigger documentary? I was like,
Yeah.
this, I got to make this documentary one day, so and that's kind of what led to this. Um, and yeah, that's yeah.
So I'm interested, this just popped into my head while you were talking about other films.
Mm,
Obviously, we saw massive, everyone talked about Oppenheimer a few years ago. Um,
mm,
there's this sort of, I think Oppenheimer did a good job of challenging that sort of, there's the glorifying of America did great. We built the bomb. We're awesome. Um, Oppenheimer did a good job of sort of challenging that narrative of it being a good thing and, having the character of Oppenheimer sort of have these regrets about building it. But I'm wondering what your perspective is because you have so much experience with these people who actually worked on these testing sites. Um, for
mm,
a representation like a film like that in the media where you
mm.
see this glorification of the bomb, um, is that is it I mean, what is your thoughts on the way that the public
Yeah.
perceives this sort of media representation?
Well, it's media representation behind like nuclear weaponry and nuclear as a whole.
Hmm.
Even on we've tried to actively avoid the kind of nuclear power thing in this doc
Yeah.
because that's a completely separate issue. Although it's kind of not, there is still many related factors. Each reactor is just potential for making more nuclear weaponry, honestly. But there's a um, I think that there's this view that was kind of pushed through pop culture on nuclear weaponry and the idea of nuclear and radiation turning you into this like superhuman like
Yes.
mutant thing, and kind of there was all this kind of glorification behind it that justified the existence of nuclear weaponry and the idea of nuclear power and all this kind of thing. And a lot of that was pushed by the US,
Hmm.
honestly, into different pop culture. You can even look at, episodes of like The Simpsons and stuff where it's pushing a radioactive man and Homer works
Yeah.
in the nuclear power plant, and you see all these kind of things. And it's really pushed heavily in pop culture as like this positive thing.
Hmm.
Um, Even in the kind of history and the storytelling of the end of World War II, and you look at how the nuclear weapon ended World War II. I don't know. This is the thing. You look at some of the evidence, you look at a lot of the evidence that we found and stuff, and you talk to a lot of people that we've talked to, and you actually get this sense, really. And I think this is something that is hard to define as a certainty. I have my opinion, and I think it's something that if you research into and you watch the documentary, you can kind of form your own opinion of the idea that really it wasn't necessary,
Yeah.
and that the droppings on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were actually they were tests.
Hmm.
Ultimately, Japan was going to surrender
Yeah.
very soon before that anyway, and I think really that was completely unnecessary. And there's been a lot within, pop culture and the media and stuff to justify the existence of nuclear weaponry. Because if you think about the concept of it, it's absolute insanity.
Yeah.
Really, it's
Hmm.
got absolutely zero use. It costs trillions of dollars on a global scale. It's just absolutely pointless.
Yeah.
So you got to justify it somehow. So the representation of it is bad. I think Oppenheimer um, is an interesting one. We were out shooting the documentary. I mean, we traveled 150,000 kilometers all around the world. We did 20 different states in the US, Hawaii, Australia, New Zealand, all over the UK to capture these kind of like first-hand accounts with people that have actually been, suffered from the results of nuclear weapons testing. And we were doing a lot of that, particularly in the US when Oppenheimer was being released.
Hmm.
Um, so we actually met with a few people that were going to the premiere of Oppenheimer, and one guy that was actually in it, which was
Yeah.
kind of strange. And the thing that kind of became um, a kind of opinion after this was it did an okay job of certain things, but it didn't actually look at any of the people affected. There was this moment where you have the thing with Oppenheimer having these flashes to the Japanese people that have been, completely destroyed by this bomb, and that was kind of it.
Yeah.
It didn't really take on, but it was a biopic of Oppenheimer. So I think for what it was trying to sell itself as, it did sell itself as that. It didn't try and push too far beyond that, which is a shame.
Hmm.
Ultimately, because the bigger story, frankly, is yes, you look on a personal level, there's this very interesting story behind the man that created something and has this ultimately regret of this
Hmm.
incredible destruction that he's released on the world kind of thing. But there is the bigger story of all of these millions and millions of people that have been affected since,
Yeah.
and it's, that's still going today, even though they stopped testing in the 90s.
Hmm.
It's going to be going for a very, very long time,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. A lot of what you were talking about in the film was the sort of health um, fallouts of
Mm.
from the soldiers who were on the sites. Now their kids have all these cancers and everything. And it just really made me think a lot about, we have this huge rise in cancers and all of these diseases, what is that
Mm.
all connected? And these, it's really kind of impossible to tell because they just, perhaps that's just my naivety about it, but they just really weren't tracking that kind of information. Or perhaps
No.
they were, maybe you. But
Mm.
how did you, I mean, you do, like you said, you were all over the map in terms of these sort of perspectives that you were getting. How did you find these people? How did you determine which ones to include in the film?
Yeah, that's yeah. So we um starting this piece, I kind of lined up. I managed to kind of find a few atomic veterans
Mm.
within the UK. and we sort of found five atomic veterans in the UK. And I met this other guy called Alan Owen and a reporter called Susie Boniface. And we lined up these kind of things, the little trip all around the UK to kind of get these.
Mm.
And then meeting the vets was exactly what I always wanted to get was this recounting of the experience of this atomic bomb.
Mhm.
And our first interview with a guy called Brian Unthang was just that absolutely satisfied that it was, he described everything in such a vivid and incredible way that it was like, that's exactly what I was looking for. And then the amazing thing was each five of them that we went to interview all had the same recounting of exactly the same things. Some little things that were unique, like seeing like black rain, and like even Brian's one of was a really strange one about they had like green rain that was rising up
Wow.
from the
Mhm.
ocean and just this like incredible, crazy, crazy stuff. But we kind of found those myself, and then Alan runs this organization called Lab Rats, which
Mhm.
is all about his concept of lab rats was there's each country has their own like nuclear affected organization that helps people within that country. But his was more about, well, we have this global, all these people affected globally, and we're all suffering from the same stuff and the same problems and the compensation issues and like the recognition issues and stuff. If we connect them all,
Mhm.
then we can work on this together. And that was the idea of lab rats. And so through meeting Alan, it was kind of like that is the bigger story. There is something there in all of that and connecting all of these issues and creating this global view. So Alan then helped us connect us with other people. But we kind of there's a I think with all documentary, there's a level of ethics and like moralities to certain things you've got to kind of like approach, which is very, my background is all in scripted, uh, mostly. So it's very different to scripted. So it's kind of very like trying to take on that kind of the ethical view pretty strongly. So we ended up finding out about this thing called the Nuclear Truth Project, and they have these things called the Nuclear Truth Protocols. And what these are just there was just a set of rules that we were advised to use by Alan and by a few other people that we met, that these will basically allow you to work with anybody who are affected by nuclear issues, um, without causing harm and without like doing things. So we took that on, which was basically a way of including the communities, and because a lot of these are like indigenous communities as
Yeah.
well, like
Mhm.
huge amounts of indigenous people affected. Um, we've obviously already had other issues being taken advantage of as
Yeah.
well. So like a lot of people in the past have, not naming names or anything, but there's been a lot of issues where people take advantage of these people. They get the story, they sod off, and that's
Yeah.
it. And they're just nothing, they don't give anything back. So this is part of our thing is making sure that we follow these nuclear truth protocols. And then one of the things I did as like a personal thing, I realized that a lot of the people in this are suffering from PTSD.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like rather than us reaching out directly to someone, um, and causing potential harm, whatever, bringing up issues that they're kind of trying to forget or whatever,
Yeah.
it was kind of like instead of that, we'll go via somebody else.
Mhm.
So we'll make sure that we're always connecting to someone that we wanted through somebody else. So I'd use Alan to help us get to a lot of people. We use Timothy Hawkins in Australia to help us get to a lot of people. Susie Boniface, who works for the Mirror in the UK, help us to get to a lot of people. And it kind of just that approach um, helped, I
Mhm.
think.
Yeah.
It was harder and it was longer, but it definitely like helped, I think. Um, yeah.
I think one of the moments that really stuck with me a lot was you have this whole segment where the veterans are fighting for recognition from the government about what they did in the war. And eventually, I think what 2023 or 2022, they get their medals for the recognition from the king. Um, and there's this really powerful moment where your sort of main character, Alan, the story sort of follows him, and his father was one of these Christmas Island soldiers. And there's this really powerful moment where um, a soldier hands over to Alan what would have been his dad's medal. That actually made me
Mm.
start crying. It was really powerful, and that
Oh.
sort of very much encapsulates the point of this story is that the government, like you said earlier, they were test subjects. They didn't care about the implications of what would happen to these soldiers, these people who are risking their lives for their country, and they're just putting them into, not in the line of fire, but in, the line of fire from science,
Yeah.
and then just continuing to just throw them aside and not care about them. And I think that, it is really sort of the core takeaway that people should be angry about, the way that these veterans are treated. We're
Mm,
constantly reminded to be respectful to veterans and to care about veterans, but the government who made them, these soldiers, don't care about them. Um,
yeah. Well,
and
I mean, that's ultimately what this thing is about, is this injustice of, how these people are treated
yeah,
and just they're completely ignored, that's the thing. Um, I'm glad you like that part of the film as well. It's a very interesting thing because that's one of my favorite parts. And this funny story about that moment is that actually we uh we managed to line that up with Brian, who was the atomic veteran, who he's in a lot of the film as well, and we lined it up so that he could give Alan his dad's medal, um, which worked out fine. Some sound issues in that thing. It was quite there was a few issues, but kind of came together. The funny thing, the funny thing is that the following year, Alan, as part of Lab Rats, and Susie Boniface, they managed to pull together this ceremony to recognize the veterans, and he had the like Lord Lieutenant of Somerset and all this thing, and this big like annual meeting where he had a ceremony for all of the surviving vets and their families to come along and receive the medals at a ceremony because after the British government basically gave them this medal, they didn't give any ceremony or anything. They literally just sent me the post. That's it. Told you, see you later. That was it. Which is really not good enough for them after like
yeah.
80 years of almost 80 years of waiting for some kind of recognition was
Mhm.
just not enough. So Alan was like, right, I'm going to make this happen. He's done that. And they surprised him at this thing with giving him his dad's medal. And this was a year after we'd done this with Brian.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is great. And it was this incredibly emotional moment. It's one of the very rare moments where I've actually seen Alan get emotional.
Mhm.
We managed to get one moment in the dock, but he is a very like hard, straight-faced kind of guy, lovely, compassionate, but like you can't make him cry,
Yeah.
it's that kind of thing. And this one, he did get emotional. And as I'm capturing this, my camera just completely dies.
Oh God.
Everything
Oh
dies, and I'm just
no.
like, what just happened? Like there's power, everything's running through. I managed to get like started up and I'm like, what the hell is going on? And I'm looking at my sound guy Rodrigo with like who traveled the whole world with me. He's been my rock on this thing. And I'm like, dude, the camera's like I'm like
Uh-huh.
I can't get it. And I'm like, get sound, get sound. Like it was just a whole thing. We completely missed this beautiful moment. And like luckily I'd had this thing already, but it was like, damn, that was better. And it was kind of like that's the only time in 3 years that this had happened for just completely random reasons, no rhyme or reason to it whatsoever. And it was like, I guess we just weren't meant to
Yeah.
capture that moment. I guess it was just not meant to be.
Yeah. Alan
Yeah.
Alan Spirit was saying, "No, I don't want anyone to see me cry."
Right. That was exactly what it
Yeah.
was. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we obviously live in a very politically tense time at the moment. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
requiring a lot of individuals to rise up in order to make change. Um, in terms of this story, what can the average citizen do to make a difference or change regarding the effects of nuclear radiation? So, if someone watches this movie,
Yeah.
they're empowered to do something. What are sort of some steps that they can do to help
Mm.
make a change?
I mean, the big thing from the very beginning of this was about education,
Mm,
was the fact that a lot of people don't know about this issue and that it needs to be known, kind of thing. The kind of call to action of this documentary is actually specifically related to the UK, but obviously a global audience on this just helps as a general thing as well. The flow through on the documentary is obviously there's this the nukes blood scandal,
mm,
which is the fact that the UK government has been essentially hiding these minimum 150 blood records of these soldiers that they tested while they're out there, and they've kept them,
mm,
which is one is illegal. They can't be doing that, and this is the whole basis of the case. They've then hidden them. which is again illegal. If there's lots of issues around this case that basically they shouldn't have had these things. So now the case is to try and get them back, to use those to basically help get appropriate compensation and recognition for what these guys, for what these veterans did, for serving their country is the idea. This is not a new case.
Mhm.
There's a previous case called the Rosenblatt case that was approached, it was back in 2013, I think it was, or so, where they had lots of evidence that these guys have been affected by nuclear weapons testing and that there is proof that this is way beyond the usual cancer levels of typical serving soldiers. And that case was basically thrown out because it just took them too long to basically put this case together, which is ridiculous. But the MOD, the Ministry of Defense in the UK, their tactic for doing this is basically just delaying litigation, delaying until the claimants can't afford
Yeah.
to continue. And it's often a very big, it's any big corporation, any big government kind of thing will use that as a tactic because you just run out of money. So the Ministry of Defense actually used 17 million pounds of UK taxpayer money to deny veterans
Mhm.
compensation, which is bonkers.
Yeah.
So the idea really is that if you can bring enough attention to this and get people to realize that they're using money, hard-earned money that you have made to deny veterans compensation, I'm pretty sure no one's going to be very happy about that. So, I mean, I don't want that,
Mhm.
like I have no desire for my money to be used to stop people from, who have served their country from getting money. So we bring as much attention to that as possible. We get this kind of out there into the world. That is ultimately that will stop them from being able to do that again as a tactic against this new case. And then this new case, if these guys can get that, it then sets a new precedent on a global scale as well for how other governments have to handle these things.
Mhm.
Ultimately, the UK government is kind of the worst. Um, at this point, the US government does have the RECA program for those atomic veterans and the downwinders and the uranium miners and scientists and stuff that have been affected. That was actually recently reinstated. It actually did lapse, and it did get reinstated very recently. But again, that will lapse again in 2027, I think it is. So there's a very limited window for people to apply on that as well.
Do you have, I mean, you've mentioned some of, like the lab rats. Do you have any sort
Mm.
of charities or other organizations that you can pinpoint that people can go to get more resources or to
Yeah.
understand more? Can you name some of those as well?
Yeah, yeah. We so the film's actually endorsed by ICANN and Labrats. So ICANN is the Nobel Peace Prize winning organization that has like 110 different partner organizations, 650 partner organizations across 110 different countries. They're massive. They're a very big thing, and they're all about nuclear abolition. So disarmament on a global scale, basically. Um, like I say, they endorse the film. I think they have a ton of different resources that um, you can learn from and that are really, really useful. Like I say, they do very much focus on the nuclear abolition side of things, which is a little different than what the documentary is about. It's something we support 100%, but it is a different kind of subject matter slightly. Lab Rats, which is our main character, Alan Owen, that is his organization. That is a really fantastic learning resource for sure. Well, they have a huge educational sector. They've actually integrated a lot of their stuff with educational programs within the UK and now pushing out to schools and stuff as well. So that's really fantastic. So they're a really good educational source. Yeah.
Great. So the last question that I always ask anyone that we're interviewing, we have a lot of
Mm,
people who come to Film East saying, "I want to make a movie." We're not a
fair
filmmaking
enough.
organization, so
Yeah.
I never really have sort of any answers. Like I don't know what to provide these people. I don't make movies. I critique them. Um, I'm the enemy of the filmmaker. So I
Oh,
always
okay.
like
I'm
I
glad I did this then. This is great.
yeah, yeah. I always like to end our interviews with this sort of broad question that people always come to us and asks. Um, so I can have this sort of resource that I can send people to. Um, what is your advice for anyone who is starting out in filmmaking, um,
Mm.
wants to make a film, has no idea where to start? What sort of advice, where would you point them in terms of starting their career in making movies?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like, if you're looking to make a film, I think the first thing you've got to identify is what is your role on that film. Film is a collaborative effort. Are you a producer? Are you a director? Are you a cinematographer? Are you a sound recorder? Who are you in this thing? Identify what it is that you really want to do, because that is essential. And then, I mean, from a perspective of coming at it from no experience and like I've got this story I want to tell, you're probably a director. You probably want to tell this story, you've got to do this thing. I would honestly just try and connect with, social media is a fantastic thing for some things, other things not so great.
Some
But
things, yeah, not.
yeah, some things not so great. But you can connect with a lot of people these days. And I think, like you try and connect with like, the biggest people, they're not going to respond to you, don't get me wrong. But if you can find mid-level people, that I think that they're always interested in talking about what they do and their experience and stuff, and everyone wants to, it's like it's a nice thing to kind of share that knowledge and help people who are coming into the industry. I just reach out to people and just kind of get their experience, get their understanding. But I think the first thing you do need to do is sort of like if you're coming at this with no experience whatsoever, is understand that this is a collaborative art form and you need to know your place within it and then try and surround yourself with other experienced collaborators and understand that you're working with them and not just kind of like this is my thing, I'm gung ho, I'm making this. It's not a thing, you know. So connect with people and just ask questions, honestly, because that's the best way to go.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. Again, Daniel Everitt-Lock, director of the new documentary Our Planet, The People, My Blood. And thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Cheers, Shelby.